Okay, so it's 242, I think.
I feel like it's been 242 for weeks, but only because...
Because I go through this every
Because you go through this every week, and I think...
It is finally 242.
Yes.
All right. The prophecy...
Welcome to it, yes. We're here.
How the hell do I start this thing? I always forget. Without Jake, I don't know what to do.
How does it start, Chris? How do you make a podcast?
Idle Thumbs?
No, what?
It's Idle Thumbs?
what podcast is that?
I don't know.
Welcome to episode 3 of Nick and Chris. Like...
Oh, I say the date.
It's. Oh, you can start with it's. Of course.
It's December 23rd, 2015, and this is Idle Thumbs 242. I am Chris Remo.
And I'm Nick Breckon.
And I'm not Jake Rodkin, but
Nope.
He will be here this time. Please don't leave. Don't stop listening.
Right.
It's not just me and Nick again. Jake will be here. He's running late.
Yeah.
He will show up and pop in. We just had to get started because of time schedule concerns. But Jake will be here.
He's on the way.
It will be a classic lineup podcast.
Yeah.
So, Nick, I'm very excited about what you played this week, but I'm going to get my thing in here because I played a game that I had never even heard of, but apparently was really, really well received when it came out on PS4 earlier this year. It's a game called Helldivers, and it's from Arrowhead, the studio that made Magicka.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Weird.
That? I know. Yeah,
I mean, I knew they released a Magicka sequel recently, but
this game is not that much like it has things in common with it, but it's very different. So I found this game just because this weekend I was looking around on Steam for stuff to play. It's harder to do that now than it used to because Steam has so much more stuff on it for sure. Yeah, it's tough.
I have a hard time now.
But sometimes I still luck out or manage to just find something by going through. Usually the top sellers list is usually not that useful because I've generally heard of everything that's on there for the most part already.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean it's bad, but it's just not as useful for finding things I'm not already aware of.
It doesn't change as often.
That's also true. Yeah, a lot of stuff has been there for like years now, especially with the current. Like survival game sandbox thing.
You could probably just like rifle through what that is right now. Take a good guess, and you're
I
probably
know.
like 90% accuracy.
Game
like
Ark will be on there.
Yeah,
definitely.
some kind of Fallout. Ark.
There's a Call of Duty probably.
DayZ, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike is probably on there, maybe just because it's like $3. Yeah.
Anyway, so I found this game Helldivers by looking through the popular new releases, like page 2 or 3 of popular new releases. I guess it came out on PC a couple weeks ago, and it came out on PS4 earlier this year, which was weird because when I started the game, it said Sony Computer Entertainment America, but it was a PC game. I guess they must have funded it. Yeah. I really knew nothing about this game at all, but when I clicked on the store page and it said from the creators of Magicka, I was like, okay, well, whatever this is, I'll just give it a try.
Yeah.
So this is a single player or co-op, but basically just co-op. I have found top-down sort of Diablo-y point-and-click kill things game, but it is very twin-stick shooter-like in the sense that everything is firearms and you're constantly aiming and shooting in the way that you do in a twin-stick game. But you're still an actual person running around, so it's not you don't have that just like untethered feeling you have when you're in like a Robotron type game. So the thing that this game shares in common with Magicka, which was a game that was all about these sort of complex input spells that you cast by like putting in button combos. This game has logistics, these sort of stratagems, I think it calls them, that are abilities that you have, mainly calling things down. So calling in airstrikes, calling in supply drops. It's a sci-fi game. It's set in a very, very, very sort of Verhoeven Starship Troopers-esque world about sort of humans forcefully spreading democracy and freedom through basically fascist means. Like it's that kind of like super over the top. Sarah came into the room right at the start of this game when I knew literally nothing about it. Like I didn't know anything about this game. So I clicked I'm like, start game. And it loads up. And as it loads up, she happens to walk into the office and it goes like, soldiers, we must defend our home of Super Earth. and she's just like, okay. And she leaves.
Yeah.
But, it clearly establishes itself as a
video game,
knowingly over the top thing, and like it doesn't really do
That's
much
fine.
with that. You still just in the game, you just kill stuff forever. But,
All right.
Anyway, so I go through the whole tutorial, and it's fun. Like the tutorial is fun. You're shooting stuff, and it seems like it's going to be Diablo-esque in the sense that you're just going to be churning through dudes. Like it feels like it's just going to be just click fest fun time. And you learn how to shoot, you learn how to call down these stratagems, you learn how to go prone and like crawl under fire, and you learn how to do, throw grenades and complete objectives and do all these things. And then and then the overworld, I guess, is this crazy thing that is like taking into account what other players are, like if other players are capturing planets. And
is that a multiplayer thing? I mean, like when you say other players?
I think it's just tied into leaderboards. So I think it's just tied into like what everyone is collectively doing. It's pretty cool. Yeah. It's
massively single player experience.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But because of that, you can choose what planet you want to sort of drop down onto, this like hell dive down onto.
Mm-hmm.
And I choose one that is ranked as like low enemy, low enemy presence, easy. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. I got my fucking ass kicked. It's so hard. I was brutal. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And I try. So
you finally understood the name of the title.
Yeah.
You dove into hell.
So I die. I try the mission again. I get 1 out of 3 of the capture points, which was the objective for this particular mission. There are other kinds of objectives, but capture point is the most straightforward. So I get 1 of them, and then I eat it. I'm like, what? This is the easy. How does anyone play this game? And I quit out of the game because I'm like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I'm capable of doing this. And then later, maybe later that day, I can't remember. I loaded back into the game, and I'm like, well, it did say co-op, and it has same screen co-op. So I'm like, okay, well, I should try and play it multiplayer. Maybe I can do online multiplayer. You can. Okay, that is what this game is for. That is what this game. It has that dynamic of like, you will die a lot, but your squad mates can resurrect you. Like when you're playing in single player, you get a free sort of resurrection, which I think they call reinforcement. But it just does not have the same dynamic of like 4 of you all stomping around a forest,
right? And
resurrecting each other and helping each other out. And there's also friendly fire 100% of the time, so you're also accidentally killing each other.
Yeah,
and that is when this game is like, oh, okay, I totally get what they were doing here. They basically made a super hardcore cooperative version of a typically very not hardcore kind of game. So it has that same accessible kind of just hook to it of, I understand what I'm doing here, and I'm running around and I'm completing these simple objectives and I'm shooting guys, but it's just really hard and just demands that all 4 of you are trying. And the game does not really reward trolling. The game does not. It doesn't. There's not like a competitive part of it that rewards being a jerk to your teammates.
Right.
It's you all want to succeed. Because it's hard.
It's a little bit like Left 4 Dead in a way, in the sense that it's sort of feels like a very different thing when you're playing that with other people versus just on your own.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly built for
comparison.
That. Yeah.
That is a good comparison, because Left 4 Dead, playing it just by yourself, it does feel like an incomplete game. It feels like you're just missing something, because you are.
Yeah.
And the thing it's missing cannot be replicated without having that multiplayer component. And so this game is actually really, really cool once you start playing it with other people. And it's, nice. I was totally shocked by this game. I didn't know anything about it, and after I kind of had this experience, I looked it up, and it got a bunch of really good reviews back in March on PS4, and I just somehow never heard of it. I guess because I don't have a PS4. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'd heard...
Although I think you do have a PS4.
I do have a PS4, and I'm always looking for things to play on it. Yeah. And it's weird that I didn't know about this game. That's cool.
I wonder if it has cross-platform play. I actually don't know.
Yeah, it'd be nice if it did, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's cool. I would recommend it if you like games that are cooperative and kind of have a mindless quality to them, but actually require you to be constantly present. Like, it's a very particular combination, but like I would say Left 4 Dead is like that, right? Because basically what you're doing is you're running around and shooting people. It doesn't require a lot of concentration to do that, but the overall experience requires a huge amount of concentration because you have to chain all the mindless shit together in a very intentional way.
Right.
And it's got that. Oh, here's Jake.
Hey! It's Jake!
Hey. Oh, yeah.
So I just finished talking about a game called Helldivers, which I was playing this weekend.
Oh.
Yeah. So I guess that is a good segue here. I mean, it isn't, but I will declare that it is.
Right.
My arrival is the greatest segue. I arose on a Segway.
You rode on one of those. I don't know how to talk. You got here on one of those crazy hoverboard things that suddenly is absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, and it just are randomly exploding. Apparently,
the randomly.
Did you hear about this?
Sorry, do you mean they exploded onto the scene, or like they're catching fire?
They're catching fire,
like
the Hunger Games,
becoming very popular.
Yes,
yeah. With the populace, yes.
You mean they're melting?
They are melting
with their popularity. They're melting, though.
Yep. Yeah, they're melting. Anyway,
now that's the perfect segue.
Yeah, we're segue. We're in a multi-segue chain.
Any video game.
Yeah.
Because video games are huge. They're bigger than movies. They're exploding.
I did play Star Wars games this week. Actually, speaking of movies that came out this week that are big, I played. Because I was on 3 moves ahead, I played Star Wars Rebellion because we did
Is that an RTS?
I know
you've talked
not.
About it on the, okay, no.
Man, you guys did a Rebellion episode of 3 MA.
We did a full 90-minute Rebellion episode, which was actually really enjoyable to record.
That's their Christmas episode, right? It's coming out this week, I think?
I guess so.
It's so good.
Sure.
It's so funny.
Christmas Rebellion. Yeah, so I played that, and I don't really want to spend any time talking about it, except to say that it actually. So it led me to.
What is it?
Well, Rebellion is essentially a combination of like a grand strategy game and an RTS, but the RTS component is absolute garbage. So it's kind of just a strategy game. It's the kind of sort of conquest style. It's not really a 4X, in the traditional sense, but it's sort of along the lines of those games. I mean, the setup is meant to be a strategy game that reflects kind of the relationships between the rebellion and the empire in the original movies. And it was interesting. That conversation was really good. I would recommend listening to the episode, if only for like Rob's analysis of what that game actually is, which is a really fascinating version of a strategy game that is actually simulating like an insurgency, it's actually doing something with guerrilla warfare in a way that a lot of
it's simulating like a rebellion.
Yeah, I mean it is, but it's doing it like if you stripped away the Star Wars aspect of it and just it would still have that, and it's really actually a really interesting mechanical representation of that stuff.
That kind of thing is so rare in movie-based games.
Yeah,
I guess only ever happens when you're not tying it into. It
only happens when you're working at a company that has to spin off like 50 games based on one intellectual property over the course of a decade. You might accidentally run out of bad things.
This was made by Petroglyph, right? Or was it LucasArts?
This was LucasArts.
Oh, shit.
This was LucasArts in 1996, I think, or
Crazy.
7.
Okay.
And Petroglyph made Empire at War, which
Right,
was the much
yeah.
more streamlined, much more balanced
Okay,
version
that
of
was
this
the
game.
more typical one.
The more typical, the thing that
yeah.
you would expect, the actual like RTS thing with high fidelity and everything.
Was Rebellion a situation where a case of people saying we should make one of these games, but maybe like did any of the leads or people on the team have a pedigree of doing these things before, or was this like we've seen all of these games from the outside?
Yeah.
Now we're gonna make one and it's gonna be weird.
I think it's the latter case.
Okay.
Man,
Because
actually, hold on, I'm sorry. This game came out in 1998 and was actually developed by a studio called Cool Hand Interactive.
what?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Because I know LucasArts people worked on that game, but
I bet they were close. I bet that they were more
oh
closely
wow,
involved.
so it was actually fun. It
was probably
really
a
interesting.
duo situation. I mean,
Yeah. Huh.
LucasArts feels like it spent a
Man,
while there as a weird hybrid like that.
No information
Yeah.
on this studio.
Well, yeah.
Interesting. In any case, it shares a lot with like Master of Orion and that sort of like early 90s strategy game, and I imagine that be it LucasArts guys or that studio, they were looking at all of those games. But what they ended up with was like a very unique, probably for all time.
Man, do you think that was a studio that
because
was...
there's no one's ever going to make a game that is this weird today ever.
Sorry, do you think that Cool Hand Interactive was a company that was spun up for this purpose and was named as a play on Cool Hand Luke?
That was what I was hoping
Oh,
and didn't
man.
want to talk about it.
Sorry,
Oh my
okay.
God.
I did the shitty thing. Anyway,
Wow.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. It's
That
probably,
might be
You think it's
the
a reference to Luke Skywalker's severed hand?
His cool hand.
Yeah. I'm really hoping that's where we're at with this.
Yep.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. Anyway, so yeah, I guess I would recommend listening to that episode for discussion
So
of that game.
that's on
but
3 Moves Ahead
yeah,
this week? You think?
yeah, I think so. It
So
should be.
you can find 3 Moves Ahead at idlethumbs.net with all the rest of the shows we host.
Yeah, but then that led me to play to fire up the original X-Wing, which was interesting.
Why? What? Just out of curiosity, why did you... I'm glad that you did, but why did you load up X-Wing rather than TIE Fighter?
Specifically because I would just typally load up TIE Fighter,
Right, okay,
and I was
that's what I
very
figured.
curious
Yeah.
to see what that original. Because my experience with X-Wing was, and actually, it unlocked a memory that I didn't have before, which is that, and I know Chris, your experience with Star Wars was, I played all these Star Wars games, but I don't know what Star Wars is,
Yeah.
right? I actually remembered that was the case specifically with X-Wing for me,
Oh,
where I
crazy.
loaded up
Interesting.
X-Wing as probably like a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it
didn't
would've come
know,
out when
had
we
not
were both
really
9.
watched Star Wars and understood what it was. And even at that, I think I ended up watching Return of the Jedi first. And I had no idea what it was. So I remembered sitting down and playing that game for the first time and having no idea what it was. And
Much like my experience playing Helldivers,
Yes.
I had not yet seen the blockbuster Helldivers
right.
film.
You were not aware of the Helldivers cinematic universe.
Right, exactly. So
So I played a little bit of X-Wing, and the thing that I could say about it is that it's interesting that they chose to go so I guess it reminded me of an era in which games like X-Wing and Supremacy. Well, sorry, Supremacy. That's the UK title of Rebellion.
wow.
We were just referring to it as that on the podcast, so now
Crazy,
I guess
okay.
it just became
All right.
that in my head. But
Yeah.
in any case, the games like this.
You think that's because there was a UK studio called Rebellion? Why would they not?
I don't
Why would
know.
that not be able to?
Yeah, it's weird.
That can't be the case. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. But in any case, so
The UK does not look kindly to rebellion. It's cultural sensitivity. Anyway, you were playing X-Wing,
but yeah, it
known in the UK confusingly as X-Wing Commander.
Known in the UK as a Z-Wing.
right.
Just to really drive that home.
But yeah, it was interesting because it reminded me that, well, one, how unintuitive this game was at first blush, right? I mean, it's a game that has a billion controls, and even today, it just like you can't map those controls to an Xbox controller. Like you basically,
for sure,
you're basically
you
stuck using your keyboard and an Xbox controller, which is insane.
Yeah.
Or like using a flight stick, or doing what you did as a kid and just using the mouse and a keyboard and pawing, and like Luke. So I pawed around like Luke and for a while. And yeah, just the number of controls and the number of like just different mechanics. Somebody who played like Super Mario and then loaded this game up would just be completely lost. And it reminded me of being a kid and just being completely lost within the mechanics of this game. And actually, like, I think that feeling is really interesting because it's very similar actually to playing Rebellion, which is that game is completely impenetrable for a long time. And in fact, the thing we talked about on the podcast was that I still don't know half of the things that are in that game. And I probably played hundreds of hours of that stupid game. And like that was a shared experience on that podcast. Yeah. And just, I think it's interesting that, and it actually goes back to that reader mail from last week, in terms of balance, right? And, you know, how like right now, games have just become, they fit more easily into genres, and then within those genres, it seems like a lot of effort is spent on, you know, polish, essentially, right?
Sure.
But there are games in the 90s that you can go back and play
90s
that
PC.
are
I mean, 90s
insane.
everything, but 90s PC in particular.
Yeah, and both of these games feel like examples that just they wouldn't exist today. There's not even like anywhere close. And Empire at War is a perfect example of that, right? I mean, that's the modern equivalent of this, and it's much more streamlined, much more, you know. But as a result, just a lot less interesting. And you can play the like X-wing equivalent in Battlefront, the Star Wars Battlefront game that just came out. And it does, you know, it looks, when you're playing it, it looks like the new movie. It looks like really polished and, you know, graphically it's amazing, and you're flying around, and the speed of it is like really correct to what the speed and sort of animation.
You're probably not reprogramming like shield efficiency.
Well, you're not doing anything. You're just holding fire, right? So like they've sort of visually represented what a Star Wars battle scene looks like.
Yeah.
But in terms of the feeling of like what you actually want and like what your brain can like do with that situation, like none of that is interesting, right? And so like it's really interesting to see those weird games that just have a billion mechanics and are very difficult to play. And not really, if you looked at them, you wouldn't go, oh, that's just like the movie. And yet, like, the feeling of playing is actually...
That's such a key distinction.
Yeah, because, like, in the movie, they say whatever, they're talking about shields and stuff, but, like, that's not really...
And it's flavor. It's like background flavor.
It's just background garbage.
But when you're actually doing it and you internalize it, and it's no longer something that is impenetrable and impossibly complex, the feeling of having to move your hand around all that, like the feeling of constantly having to be flipping switches, or in your head it feels like flipping switches and doing all this stuff and like paying attention to your various little readouts and doing all that stuff, that when you synthesize all of that and it becomes second nature, that is when it like magically feels.
And it's like weird too, because in a way, you know, the internalization is the key, right? And like it almost feels like something like Battlefront is designed for people that are only going to play that game for like an hour, right? You know, something that is just really easy to pick up and play. And yet those games are not designed for that. They're designed to, you know, basically string you along with unlocks until you're, you know, playing that game for 50 to 100 hours. And at that point, like, there's nothing left to sort of
it's
like... It's
not unlocking any of its own complexity to you.
Right. I mean, maybe a little bit here and there, but not really, right? I mean, and it's not something that you're unlocking. It's something that the game is sort of giving to you, right? I mean, it's not something that you actually have to, like, work at.
I guess that's what I mean by complexity.
Yeah.
Like, the game is unlocking goods and, like, presumably abilities and equipment and stuff.
Yeah.
But the game is not, like... But that stuff is...
You're saying it's not revealing, like, heretofore unseen depths inside of the thing you already had.
Right.
Like, inside of the systems that were already there.
Exactly,
Rebellion is so good. Rebellion is nuts. So here's the thing that's crazy about Rebellion that we realized we were talking about Rebellion. When you're playing as the Empire, God, I love this so much. I hadn't thought about this, and I played this game a billion hours. But Rebellion it's impenetrable in many ways, but also probably chiefly its UI design and just kind of the way that it operates. It is it's a grand strategy game. Like imagine playing Crusader Kings, and actually this happens in Crusader Kings to some degree. But you have planets that you're taking over and building up with resources and multiple components. There are characters that you can sort of send on missions and just all these things that are happening in the galaxy. And then meanwhile, you have these 2 droids, and then a bunch of tabs on the side that are kind of
advisor droids.
Yeah, they're like advisor droids. There's for the Rebellion, it's R2D2 and C3PO, but for the Empire, it's like evil R2 and evil C3PO, which is hilarious. It's just like a red R2 or C3PO, and then just like a weird spider thing. That also, when you lose the game, the evil R2 just like kills you before you can be killed by the Rebellion. It's like a really weird game. But so while you're playing, though, various notifications come in as things happen in the galaxy because it's a real time game. It's constantly running, and as these notifications come in, the little droids say things to you. Like, oh, there's a new planet has blah blah blah, or whatever. They have like a little voice file that's attached to each notification. But those notifications, if you play at anything faster than just the base speed, are coming in rapid fire, and so you have these rapid fire notifications along with just the most inane VO sound files just playing constantly, and it just becomes this like aggravating thing that you have to turn off. But what's really funny that we realized, and the other thing too, is that all of the actual like way of the user interface and just all of the menus and things are just constantly like popping up windows and just dragging things around and just clicking on planets and just opening up all these different like boxes and things. It's just like it's insane. There's nothing that's unified. It's all just it's all custom for each particular case. And so it just leads you to basically do this, insane micromanagement over and over and over again while you're playing this game. And the thing that we realize is that basically that actually kind of does a good job of giving you the feeling of running a galaxy from the position of being like a weird bureaucrat within the Empire. Like you're not, Darth Vader running around doing anything fun. You're just this guy who's got to listen to these stupid droids. Jeez. They're like 1,000 planets, and they're all just trying to keep track of like everything going on. Like, there's like all these ships over here. I don't know how to do all this stuff. Oh gosh. Oh no, I'm dead. Like it's just, oh man, it's so funny.
And then before you, sad Imperial comptroller can like escape with your life, your droid kills you if you fail.
Yeah, the life of the character that you are playing as in Rebellion is hilarious. It's so good. Like everybody else is having fun, and you're just like the weird guy, like just clicking on 1,000 things forever.
Yeah.
So anyway, but Star Wars. Yeah, it's good.
Was this game well received? Do you know?
It was not.
It
was not.
Commercially or critically?
Probably both. I don't know commercially, but I would imagine so. I mean, it's a Star Wars game, but I would guess probably didn't.
It feels like it was in the black hole of them just churning them out. Like a new Star Wars idea. It felt like it rolled off the conveyor belt every 3 months and just kind of disappeared.
Yep. It was like the Masters of Terras Kasai era of just like...
wow, is it pronounced Terras Kasai?
I don't know.
I always just thought it was Terras Kazi because it's just a word. But yours sounds way more...
I don't remember the spelling, so
it's new canon.
Yeah.
I mean, well, Terras Kazi or Terras Kasai is no longer probably canonical. So.
True.
Man, did you see the new Star Wars movie, Nick?
I did. I had to miss it on Saturday, but then our friend Seth gave me his tickets on Sunday night.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Okay, yeah. This is the dumbest observation. One of my favorite moments. Are
you about to start spoiling Star Wars, Chris? Because the internet wants to know if you're going to spoil Star Wars.
I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to say something that happened in the first minutes of the film.
Spoiler.
Whatever. So speaking of Star Wars pronunciations, in the really, really, really early in that movie, this character played by Max von Sydow, which was a hilarious inclusion in that film, which is good, whatever, refers to the character Kylo Ren, which is the new Sith guy. And and he pronounces it in like I saw this movie in theaters twice, and I just like savor whenever he says it because he pronounces it in this amazing way. He says like Kylo Ren. And I don't know, I can't do it, but he says it in an amazing way, and it just like sticks in my brain. And even though I can't reproduce it, it's just there all the time. And it made me think of how completely variable all the pronunciation in Star Wars has always been. Like some characters refer to Han as Han. Han refers to the Millennium Falcon as both the Falcon and the Falcon. Like,
the Falcon thing really bothers my girlfriend Janelle.
Oh,
she
really?
hates that. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's a weird. Yeah, it is weird that all of those are. Did you know that George Lucas actually pronounces Hoth as Hoth?
Really?
Yeah, he pronounces like the German like umlaut Hoth,
but none of the actors do.
No,
I feel like George Lucas pronounces Star Wars things in a way just to troll everyone.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because he's always like, and they've got those laser swords. Like, you wrote the script where you call it a lightsaber. You wrote it.
That's my favorite thing, though, because as the person who thought of all that stuff, they were laser swords before he thought of the phrase lightsaber.
I know.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the best. Everyone else is like, gee, doesn't know. George Lucas doesn't call it the race. Like, he fucking made it up. Like, it was just a fucking laser sword until he came up with lightsaber.
I know, and I love that he's still just like, oh, it's just those, they got those laser swords. Like, good. You're doing it. You're living the dream.
Oh, it's so good. There was this hilarious interview that I saw with Lucas. Being interviewed actually by Anthony Corboni, who you guys may know, and someone else who I'm not sure. And like, oh, so he was at the premiere.
Oh, this is the red
Force
carpet
Awakens.
thing. Yeah.
And it was like it was like the interviewer was like, so what's coming up? Any new movies? And he's like, yep, making small movies, making a lot of movies. Oh, okay. Well, anything we'll get to see anytime soon? No one will ever see them. Just me. Just me and my friends. And my interviewers just didn't know how to deal with any of this. It was such an awkward, hilarious situation. And Lucas just did not give a shit. And then Frank Marshall,
God, what a weird thing.
Like ran up and was like, Jurassic World, #1 movie, Jurassic. Don't forget that, #1. And Lucas just kind of looks at him for like,
oh man, it's amazing,
and just goes,
oh my god,
I will crush you like a bug. It was so strange.
Yeah.
So good.
Weird.
I thought that was like a joke video.
The best guy at this point, because now that he just like is untethered from anything.
Oh yeah,
he just like is hilarious all the time.
Doesn't care at all.
It's good. Anyway, that movie was good too.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yep.
So Nick, a thing I really want to hear about is that you played Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah, so I'll segue into Dwarf Fortress real quick, which is that also a game that is a strategy game that is impenetrable, but then and also a game that reminds me of 1993, but that I had never played and had heard about a lot. I don't know if you guys had Dwarf Fortress is like this weird
of course we've heard
thing
about it
that's just been out there that people will just like reader mail constantly references Dwarf Fortress. I really didn't know much about Dwarf Fortress. I'd never really Googled Dwarf Fortress, but I just had a vaguely kind of knew.
Once every 6 months or so, I get into a huge hole of obsessively reading about Dwarf Fortress and reading people's stories from Dwarf Fortress and being right on the cusp of actually playing it. And then I basically get scared because I'm a baby.
Dwarf Fortress has had the Eve Online effect on me forever, where I'll happily read someone's completely insane story of what has happened inside of their world of Dwarf Fortress, and it's fascinating and draws you in to the point that it then makes me feel like I'm coming in too hot and will never and can't have to sort of get away from it before I even consider playing it.
So here's an email that we received. I'm going to preempt reader mail. Hi Thumbs, in your latest podcast 241, Suddenly the King of France, one of your reader mails mentioned Dwarf Fortress, and both Chris and Nick mentioned how neither of them had played, but probably should. Well, I'm here to rectify this situation. To clarify, I will teach Nick Breckon how to play Dwarf Fortress.
Oh, Nick Breckon.
Anyone else is invited as well, however, and please do not take offense at this. While I love the insight that all of you bring to the podcast, let's be honest, Nick's stories are the best stories. I'm a long-time player, probably 6 or 7 years now, which is the extent of my resume, I guess. I don't know how or when, but I am absolutely willing to devote time to teaching Nick Breckon how to play Dwarf Fortress. I could go on and on about my favorite game, but I don't want to write a huge email, so I'll leave it there. Thanks for a wonderful podcast that helps me fill my boring commute. If you read this online, I would prefer to use my online handle, LegKindred. P.S. With the holidays coming up, it would make a great Christmas present? Let me teach Nick Breckon how to play Dwarf Fortress.
man.
So,
Yeah. So teach
but you
me.
did it.
Well, no, I'm going to take him up on that offer, because this game is so far beyond what I expected in terms of complexity. Like I knew, like I had read some of those articles, I guess, a while ago of just, the insane things that can happen. I mean, it's an incredibly systemic
Or
game.
like Dwarf Fortress patch notes is always the thing that you end up reading at this point.
Yeah. But I had no idea what the actual experience of playing it was going to be like. And in fact, I'd seen screenshots, but I didn't really understand the depths to where this game extends. So anyway, I will just walk through kind of my initial experience, and there are no crazy stories. So I'll just kind of start this week, and then I guess probably in further weeks, explain where I'm at. But so Dwarf Fortress, I guess for people who don't know, is developed by I guess two people. I guess they're brothers, and it's been in development since like 2006.
And I think principally one of them is really the developer.
Yeah, I think it's Tarn, who is the chief developer on this, and it's sort of one of those like life work games where it just feels like they're probably going to develop this thing forever, and so
Fortress is definitely a calling.
Yeah, and so. So I loaded it up, and by the way, just it's very easily gettable on their website. So go to just Google Dwarf Fortress. I don't know what their website is, but like it's just
thanks.
Yeah, good. No, I'm just saying don't go to Steam, don't go to GOG or whatever. It's just something that is on their own personal website. But it's very easy to grab. So you grab it, you load it up, and I am met with what looks like just like a DOS prompt window that then starts, spitting out a bunch of garbage, which then segues into a very simple menu. And I chose Start Game. And then for about 5 minutes, it was like the longest reticulating splines loading screen of all time. Yeah. So basically, the way that this game begins is it generates the procedural world that you're going to start in. But the way that it does it is essentially simulating an entire world up through the ages, and you can kind of just hit stop when you want to start playing.
Okay.
And so, I guess I should just generally explain, like Dwarf Fortress, it gives you like this insanely large world map. Everything on the map is represented in, I guess just ASCII,
kind of text, whatever text character set
it's like a code character set. Yeah. And so, like water is represented by like circles or rather like, the letter O or whatever. And, everything is represented by very simple grid-based characters. And so I guess the goal of the game, I mean, it is ostensibly a roguelike. You're leading a group of dwarves who are represented by little smiley faces. And the objective is to just simply survive, I guess. I mean, it's very open-ended, but generally speaking, you build up a fortress and you mine in mountains and collect resources and build up your fortress, and that's kind of the game. So after the world generates, you kind of choose a spot on the map to start your fortress. And then you're just kind of there. And I had I hadn't read a guide or anything. Yeah. But you look at the game and there are like a couple of smiley faces, a billion other characters that you haven't internalized yet, so you have no idea what anything represents. And then just a cursor, which is just an X, that you can move around using arrow keys. And then on the right side of the screen, a window will tell you what you're currently highlighting. So, this character, it represents a goat, and then it will say like, a simple goat in the top right. And so you're just slowly scrolling over this enormous grid to just see what any of this stuff is, and that's kind of the start. And so you begin paused, and then start to kind of get a feel for the land and kind of what you need to do. And then, you know, I at that point I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, so I guess I'll just let it go. And I just hit space and just let the world simulate, and then it just looked like the Matrix, like just like everything starts
Waves
moving
of
like
characters.
really fast. Like the goats are just like shooting around the screen, just doing stuff, and like, you know, my smiley faces weren't doing anything, so clearly I was already fucking up completely. Like I had no idea what they're. So I just paused it again and then read a simple little guide just to understand like
Published
how
by
to,
a simple goat.
yeah, how to you know, do the basics. And
How do I make smileys move?
yeah, pretty much. That was like a half an hour of just like, how do I make things do stuff? And it turns out that this game is insane. Like, it's actually like, I mean, like, just to do basic things is insane. Like, you know, to make your dwarves do things, you don't actually issue like individual commands to the dwarves, but you give them. I guess something I could compare it to is like Dungeon Keeper, where you kind of create a section of the world that you indicate like a section of the world that you want to be carved out, and then the AI automatically goes and does that, right? So in Dwarf Fortress, you just create like a certain space of the grid and say, you know, I want this mined, and then your little dwarves, any dwarf that has the mining,
They'll go and be
labor
workers
we'll just go and be workers and do that. So, but then that extends to basically everything else in the game. So if you create a little farm plot, your dwarf, if a dwarf is set to farming, he will go and automatically do these things.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very common paradigm for games.
That's a very common paradigm. What's not common is that in order to set all of these things, you have to kind of know the StarCraft hotkey combination of like, I need to get into the destination menu, so I'll hit D, and now I know I need to, you know, click the labor thing, so I'll hit like L, and then I know I need to hit preferences now, so I hit P, and then and like just to do basic, like issue basic commands, you have to know kind of these combinations, or else it's incredibly laborious because you're just staring at all of the little like hotkey codes. But then, even if you know that stuff, you're kind of constantly fucking up because, you know, things are moving and everything is changing, you know, rapid fire. And so just the like act of just doing basic things in this game is really hard, which I did not expect, I guess. Like I figured,
I totally expected that. That's
I guess
why I was scared away.
Yeah, like just building a farm took me 10 minutes of like stressing out about where to place the farm and like how like to tell a dwarf like you should be farming, and like to make sure that like, you know, everything was set up properly. And I had no idea that it was going to be like that, but then it instantly reminded me of playing like a MUD, like a text adventure game, where I knew basically, you know, I played like an MMO style MUD for a couple of years in like 1993, and you just remember all of the like basically like hotkeys that allow you to do basic things in that game, and you just internalize them completely at a certain point, and that kind of allows you to then do the things that a more modern game would just do automatically, but it just becomes part of your like, you know, reflex. And that I already
Star Wars games.
Yeah, and I already noticed that happening. Where, you know, as like crazy as it is to stare at just a screen full of characters that represent a million different things that are all constantly moving, already you start to internalize that stuff and just look and go, oh yeah, that's a goat, he's moving over here. Okay, here's my dwarves, they're doing all this stuff. And then it like within 10 minutes of like really trying to figure out the controls, I was like, all right, I can play this game. Like this is not that bad. That's cool. Like it's actually kind of like interesting, and it reminded me of playing those games in the early 90s, and then I realized like, oh, I don't really need like there are things like DF Hack which give you a graphical representation of all this stuff, but I don't think I'm going to end up going that way because it feels like I already kind of grasp, you know, all this stuff just from playing it for like, you know, a couple hours.
Even though you basically you don't know anything.
Right. Probably. I know nothing, but it doesn't feel gross to me in the way that it initially did. So yeah, I don't know. Like I don't want to go into every minutia of playing this game because I don't have any crazy stories yet. I just sort of getting on my feet, but like it's crazy. Like just the fact that there's a Z-axis to this game. Like the second you hit, you can just like shift between levels of the world, and because it's a game that's based on like geography and mining, the second you shift to a lower level, you get that kind of...
You can see how the strata sort of...
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can see the sort of... Like, if you do it fast enough, you can almost, like, see the 3D-ness of the world.
Really
That's
cool.
crazy. That's awesome.
I mean, the second you go below, right, like, the edges of the mountain sort of creep in, and then, there's maybe, like, a pool of water over here, and you have to make sure if you're going to, build a stairway down that you don't build it into the water, and, like, all of these things. And then if you go up, you start to see the mountain also shrink to a peak and then become just a star field. It's really
crazy,
really interesting just to look at. Once you kind of once you start to see the Matrix for what it is, and then kind of like squint and you go, oh man, this is a crazy thing that somebody made that's doing a lot of stuff. Just in the first like 30 minutes, your mind is kind of blown.
Yeah.
It's really weird, but I'm gonna keep playing it, and I haven't nothing crazy has happened to me yet. I just sort of have watched my dwarves do things like hollow out mountains and stuff, but I know that I'll probably die 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good start.
Yeah. It's a goofy thing that I don't know.
That's going on the box.
Yeah.
It's a goofy thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one of those Minecrafty things that it just feels so big, and that you do have to kind of jump off the cliff of just investing your time.
Yep.
And I guess I've done that now. So whoops.
Sure. Well, you've hit the water, and the water felt like it was going to be impossibly cold.
Right.
But now you've sort of acclimated. And the ocean is still infinitely huge, but you're like, okay, I see basically that this is doable.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, to sum up, like, why I've decided to actually go for it is that it is the kind of game that, like Rebellion and like X-Wing, that I think hits that center of my brain that says, oh, I really want to learn how to do all of this stuff more than I care about like the things I'm going to create in this game.
Yeah, sure.
Which for me, like playing Minecraft, I very quickly understand how the game is played, but then it's just sort of like a time investment of like, I need to invest X amount of time to create this thing that I want to create, which doesn't really appeal to me as much as I really want to figure out how to solve this puzzle of just even the basics of this game, engaging with it and figuring it out.
That's interesting. That's an interesting perspective.
So anyway, I'll keep playing that game.
Okay.
But, should we take a break?
You want us to do the reader mail?
Oh, we can just go to reader mail.
Yeah.
No breaks.
We're, as we said at the beginning of the podcast, we're on a time constraint, so we might as well just go for it. Let's see here. Oh, this is pretty funny. Randy O writes, the first commercial indie game I designed was an iOS game started back in 2010. It's a game about math and matching, and I worked on it with a hometown pal in my spare time. Until very recently, I lived in the East Bay, San Francisco Bay Area. One day in 2012, I went to the MADE in Oakland, the Museum of Art and Digital Entertainment, for an indie show and tell. Just a little gathering to encourage indies to hang out and show off to each other what they were working on. I was sitting next to a bearded fellow and started chatting with him. It turned out we mutually followed each other on Twitter, the way so many indies do in a never-ending networking morass. Jim said he was working on a game called Frog Fractions. I was more than a little bit surprised and said that I was releasing a game called Total Toadz. My partner and I had even considered... My partner and I had even considered Frog Fractions as a name for our game, alongside numerous other math alliterations. We just had no fractions in our game, so we couldn't justify it. I don't know if that's that different than Frog Fractions.
No.
That afternoon was the first time either of us showed our games to the public. Just a crowd of 12 or so people, and of the 5 or 6 games being shown, 2 were Total Toadz and Frog Fractions. It was weird, and even weirder after Jim released his to cult hit status a few months later. Hope you enjoyed that really random experience I had. I'm looking forward to Frog Fractions 2, Randy O. Post note. Though I'm proud of it, Total Toadz, by the way, it's spelled with a Z. Total Toadz was not a success. It paid for its iOS developer fee and some coffee. Also, it's Total Toadz with a Z because at the time you couldn't sit on app names for more than 3 months, and we sat on the name Total Toadz too long, and Apple took it away from us.
Oh, that's sad. I hope that Frog Fractions 2 is actually Total Toadz 2. They were one and the same all along. Maybe Total Toadz
1 is Frog Fractions 2.
That's true.
Yeah.
Man, that's so
Total
amazing.
Toadz.
2 math-themed frog games being exhibited next to each other.
I wonder if everyone thinks about that because the Number Munchers edutainment games kind of have a frog-looking protagonist, the titular Number Muncher.
Maybe it's that the frog tongue is a really easy metaphor for like point to the like select the thing. You know, it's fun for kids and it's. I don't know.
It's probably
that. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, you got it.
So, Luke Maxwell writes, Grand Theft Auto 3. Hi, Thumbs. In your latest episode, you guys were wondering about GTA 3 and whether it acknowledged the rest of the series to the press. I actually remember an article in Official PlayStation Magazine where they visited DMA Design to see the game. For the majority of the demo, the developers used the top-down camera, pulling a gotcha towards the end and switching to third-person view. So I suppose they used the expectations of what a GTA game was at that time to drum up buzz about the new perspective in GTA 3. Happy holidays, Luke.
Wow, interesting. I remember that GTA 3 had that camera as a camera that you could switch to, and I remember being so stoked that you could play GTA 3 and the insanity of that full city from the top-down perspective camera of the old games. It was not enjoyable, I don't think, but it was a good
God,
novelty.
I wonder if there's like a GTA 4 or 5 mod that does that allows you to play from that perspective. That'd be
surely there
weird.
is.
probably weird. And
That's the kind of thing that goes into games when, you know, because they're like, well, people expect this from a GTA. I mean, this is what a GTA game is.
Or GTA 3 started with that insanely and then ended up evolving into a different camera mode. I mean, they could have that could be in the game because they built all of it and solved all those problems first. Like
that is totally possible.
Like, there's no way that Liberty City in GTA 5, 4, which one is it?
4?
4. Yeah. Oh yeah, 5 is back here. There's no way that like that city was built to also render perfectly from a fixed top-down.
Oh yeah,
maybe it is.
I doubt it.
No.
They had to build all the roofs and shit. Those games are insane.
Yeah,
that's true. God, working on those games has got to be fucking nuts.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where's the GTA Fallout mod? Top down, classic camera, GTA, for no reason.
Are you saying a Fallout mod for GTA or GTA mod for Fallout?
GTA. Where's the GTA camera mod for Fallout 4?
Top-down camera.
Somebody did do an isometric Fallout 4.
Oh, cool.
Like, did they render it deliberately? Like, was it an orthographic projection? Like, was it actually, or just like, or just fixed camera perspective?
You can do orthographic projection in the Fallout engine.
Oh, really?
So
there's actually no like shrinking perspective in this mod,
right?
Or one could do that.
Or you could.
Yeah,
man, that's really interesting. I want to see screenshots of this.
There are screenshots. You can see.
Man,
huge 3D spaces rendered with an orthographic camera look so cool and weird, and also just immediately, obviously, look like an old video game. Like,
yeah.
I occasionally, when working on Firewatch, turn the camera to orthographic and like set up really heavy directional lighting against the camera just to go, oh, look, it's like an old sim game or something, except it's in the Unity editor and looks bad.
I don't even know what to search for to find this. I searched for Fallout 4 orthographic and
try just
isometric.
Fallout 4 isometric. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really cool idea. Is it an actual mod or is it someone's concept art or something?
I don't know. It might just be that somebody made these screenshots.
Because there's a Kotaku post about someone who just made a bunch of screenshots. I really hope
it may be that it's not a mod.
I hope this is real or that someone makes it real.
Yeah.
I think it might not be actually a mod. Someone make that mod. Anyway, so Dominic Van Berkel writes, Hi Thumbs, 2 questions. You occasionally lament the fact that Idle Thumbs can be found at idlethumbs.net/idlethumbs. I don't know if we lament that as much as think it's hilarious. Anyway, he continues, I figure the only way to avoid that would have been to give the Idle Thumbs podcast network a different name. If you'd thought of this a few years ago, what would that network have been called? Alternatively, what would you call it today if renaming wouldn't be a pain in the butt? Secondly, and I think I know the answer to this
frogs.
one. Secondly, and I think I know the answer to this one, will there be a Goaty.cx this year? Rainy regards from Eindhoven, Dominic Van Berkel. There probably won't be a Goaty.cx because we're garbage.
Yeah, I wish that we had. I wish that we did, but this is the worst year for us to be able to put one of those together, unfortunately.
Yeah. We almost renamed the network the Idle Network just to sort of make it so that the flagship show didn't have the same name as the network, which creates all kinds of confusions and still does, and it's still not ideal, but we just couldn't think of another name that we liked more than Idle Thumbs, really. I guess.
Yeah,
right?
we just kind of stuck with it because of that.
Yeah.
But it is a little bit weird where it's like, listen to Idle Weekend on Idle Thumbs, listen to Idle Thumbs on Idle Thumbs, listen to Terminal 7 on Idle Thumbs, which also hosts Idle Thumbs.
Yeah. It leads to weird confusions where people who don't know the network very well will just assume that all of the shows are Idle Thumbs. Be like, oh, listen to the latest episode of Idle Thumbs where Soren Johnson interviews like whoever. And that's not correct.
It's like, oh, that's designer notes.
But you can't really blame them.
But that's also like, I really have a lot of complaints about Mac and the way they run their computer company. So like people just don't get names right.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose. Although we don't make it easier.
No, that's true.
Anyway, so there's a non-question answer for you, I guess. Let's see. What else do we have here?
Probably rename it Total Toadz.
Yeah.
.net. See if that's taken. Get that name back after that idiot let it lapse.
Whoa. After Mac stole his name.
So Eric Frieden, I'm sure I'm saying that incorrectly because there's an accent in there, writes, Broken Sword...
Teres Cassie.
Broken Sword was better broken. Hi, a very fond memory was jogged by listening to you guys talk about games that were better as demos. When I was in 5th or 6th grade, a friend of mine gave me a CD-ROM full of pirated games made by a cool, illicitly inclined older brother. What a classic method for obtaining games in the 90s. Among its many... I don't know if this was the 90s, actually, I guess. Who knows?
The year was 2012.
Among its many treasures, the CD contained a copy of Broken Sword 2, an adventure game which, for the sake of space, had been stripped of all cinematics. The game opened with the hero strapped to a chair in a burning home, mumbling about a mysterious Nico that he needed to save. I was enthralled, filled with joy by every clue that hinted at the story. The game continued like that. The characters would exit one scene to enter another on the other side of the world, with different clothes, saying a vague reference to the crazy stuff that had just happened off camera. The end of Broken Sword 2 is a slow descent of an ancient staircase in a South American temple. The exit is marked certain death. The hero mutters something about how he needs to do it anyway, for the world, for Nico, etc. I clicked certain death. The screen flickered, Windows desktop, game over, heartbroken. I recently replayed the game on my tablet, but it didn't really have the same punch as all the goofy cartoons that told me everything. I prefer my Broken Sword broken. Bye, Eric Frieden, Sweden.
That's pretty good.
That's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's not actually crazy. It's actually the complete opposite of surprising that the way to pirate games at that era was just to strip out all cinematic content and often all voice content and whatever else.
I feel like I had that experience as well, but it wasn't with a game that made a big impact on me, so I can't really.
Yeah, a friend of mine had a downloaded copy of The Curse of Monkey Island, and it had all the cinematics and most of the voice and music stripped out. And I was like, "Why are you playing this? Like, what's the point?" After a certain point.
Yeah. What Monkey Island?
3.
Oh, Curse of Monkey Island.
The one that's like live musicians and a voice cast and keyframe animated, or cell animated cutscenes. Like, just remove all of that. I guess it's fine.
Yeah, that was basically the entire point of that game.
Yeah.
Gregory Wise writes, failure to reach escape velocity. Hello, Thumbs. Thought I would throw in my shareware story. When I was young, probably 7 or 8, my dad brought home a shareware bundle called the Mac Cube, I think. When you put the disk in, it would automatically open a sort of UI overlay that showed the applications on the disk and had a button to open each of them. This detail will come into play later. One of the disks was full of shareware games, and one game kept me coming back, Escape Velocity. The first one, which actually included the whole game, but with regular messages asking you to pay for it. Escape Velocity, a top-down action-adventure space sim, is a very progression-oriented game, unlike pretty much any game I'd played at that age. You start out in the cheapest possible ship with 10,000 credits, and over time, doing missions or trading, can increasingly buy better and more capable ships. This is where my play differed. The game is set up to save your progress so you can come back later and pick up where you left off. However, since the game was launching from the Mac Cube shareware UI, it was being run off the CD-ROM and the game had nowhere to put a save file. This meant if I died, or even if I closed the application, all progress was lost. My young mind did not understand why it was working this way, but I continued to play the game, scraping together meager funds to get a slightly better ship, only to eventually get blown up by pirates or to have to close the game and lose everything. One day I decided to really go for it and try my best to get a really cool ship and do some honest-to-God dogfighting. I must have spent all day playing and saving money. I should also note Escape Velocity has a story with larger missions that give substantial rewards and unlock new ship or equipment options. These story missions are given to the player by talking to people in bars and spaceports all through the galaxy. But I never went into those bars because I was a good Christian boy not of drinking age who shouldn't go into sinful bars, and so I didn't see the story missions until later in life when I realized I couldn't be smited for things I did in a computer game. Finally, after hours of trading meager quantities of goods and cautiously running countless cargo deliveries, average payout 20,000 credits, I finally saved up 1.1 million credits, just enough to buy the Rapier ship, which I thought was a really cool ship. I was brimming with excitement as I headed towards an area I knew to be frequented by pirates. I entered the system, a klaxon sounded. I was being attacked by a pirate, finally I could fight back. I closed the distance and began firing, then I blew up. I hadn't even managed to get the pirate below 80% of his shields. I was devastated. A month or so later, I figured I could skip the shareware UI, access the CD's folders, and copy Escape Velocity to the hard drive, and play it as intended with saves and everything. I still love the Escape Velocity games, and ended up buying the 2 sequels, and strangely count my first encounters with Escape Velocity as one of my formative gaming moments. Keep up the good work, Greg.
Man,
Escape Velocity was a Mac game that I always respected to all hell and was too afraid to actually get into. It seemed really complicated to me at the age that it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a game that comes up a lot as a
classic
Mac shareware game.
Yeah, for sure.
I can remember having that experience too of playing off the CD and not being able to save. I don't know what game I was playing. Probably X-Wing.
Yeah.
Probably something very similar
Yeah.
where you just make a lot of story progress and then have to restart every time. So it's just basically a demo.
Yep. On this note, I guess, Alistair Clark writes, "Hey Thumbs, listening to last week's Reader Mail section about old games demos and spending loads of time on one thing got me thinking. It wasn't a demo, but one of the first games I played on a 3.5-inch disc was the original Space Quest, which I often played with a friend after school. At the time, we were too young to appreciate the sarcastic humor, so we instead took the series of escapes from deadly monsters very seriously. This was harder because this was the pre-mouse version, so we had to type in every command. To this day, the quote, 'You think you hear footsteps' warning of an incoming soldier freaks me out. We played most days after school. I started controlling the game, but since she was a grade above me, we soon discovered she was better at spelling and knew more words than I did, so she was better at figuring out the puzzles. We'd switch back to me at the keyboard when we needed to do something fast because I was quicker at typing. With no way to look up answers to the puzzles, the only thing we could do was try and think up solutions ourselves. Sometimes we'd be in the same room for days. After about a year, we ended up in the final area where no matter what we tried, we couldn't figure out how to complete it. Later on, we discovered that it was impossible because we'd forgotten to pick up an item at the start of the game. About 6 years later, we met up during a family get-together in our old village, and we booted up the game again and finally finished it. More than the sense of closure was the memory of her saying to her kid brother, 'We used to play this before you were born.' We were only 12, but we felt like old masters. Loving the podcast, and I hope you're all well. Alistair." Man, that is great.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's so crazy to have the experience of going back to something 6 years later, and then you're still only 12.
Yep.
Man.
Also, what a piece of shit that style of Sierra
I
game
know.
design was. Good God.
So terrible. The combination of having to guess everything with the text parser, and then also just having no way to know that you've already irrevocably fucked your game, and there's nothing you can do about it. Oof.
Yeah.
It's just real. It's what happened in real life. Simulation.
Well, you guys want to call it?
Sure.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to Idle Thumbs. The second episode of our new show, Idle Weekend, with Danielle Riendo and Rob Zachney is now up. So there are 2 episodes of Idle Weekend. They're both really good. You should listen to them. You can find them at idleweekend.net. And you can follow them on Twitter at Idle Weekend. You can email them at questions@idleweekend.net. They are still kind of feeling out the show, but they're off to a really, really good start already. You should definitely check it out. And if you do like that show or this show or any of the shows on the Idle Thumbs Network, please tell a friend. Please consider giving us a review on iTunes. These things really help us out a lot. They're awesome to read those reviews and see people recommending the show. It makes us feel good, and it also makes these shows actually grow in their audience and help us do cool things like launch more shows like we're trying to do. So, yeah, thanks for listening. One final note, because this year has been unprecedentedly complicated in terms of scheduling, we are not going to have a new regular episode of Idle Thumbs next week for New Year's. So we're trying to figure out something we can put on the feed. Who knows? Please don't unsubscribe from us.
Don't tell them they can unsubscribe. They don't know.
Oh, yeah. I don't even know what I just said.
See you next week.
Bye.